welcome, Kevin. Maggie and I are here in the Blue Mountains, outside of Sydney in Australia. Where are you at the moment?
We're in Dublin at the fabulous Shelbourne Hotel on a bit of a splurge after our last Camino.
Nice. To say, I first met Kevin in Santiago de Compostela in Pilgrim House. Kevin and I sat and had a discussion in the lounge room at the back there. Now, I found this really interesting. You are a worldwide walker, and I suppose we should start by asking about your background and how it all started. Did you start with the Camino?
Oh, no. I retired toward the end of 2013, and I went, of course, first thing I scheduled was a walk, but it was in Nepal, which is a country I'd been to for a few times and fell in love with it and the walking. And so I went there, and after a long walk on the Annapurna circuit, which is a very well-known trek there, I was on a lesser walk, and one night in a tea house. Meetings there are very similar to the Camino in that you have dinner, you sit around a table at dinner every night, typically with other walkers from all over the world. The topic of conversation got around to other walks or pilgrimages around the world, and the Camino de Santiago came up, which I had never heard of, but I liked the sound of it. Of a spiritual journey, no set starting point, walk as far as you want to. It all just sounded very intriguing, and I added to my list. I had just retired, so my plan was to, travel the world. Anyway, I finally got around to my first Camino in August in 2015 from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port.
And this year, you've been walking in Spain. Tell us a little bit about the Caminos you've been walking during this rather challenging time of COVID lockdowns. But Spain has been welcoming pilgrims now.
What's it been like?
First of all, I don't think it's all that challenging. I know there have been some times this year for a few weeks stretch there where people were sleeping in the streets between Sarria and Santiago, and it was a little tight in other parts of the Frances, but I walked for 4 months last year in Scotland, and then the Via Francigena from Canterbury, England to Rome, and then on to Assisi, and really didn't have much of a problem. It was, I think, a nice place to be, frankly, rather than being in a big city like London or Dublin or Sydney or Chicago or something. Mm. And anyway, but it was the first year since 2015 where I missed walking on the Camino de Santiago. So anyway, this year we were happy to come back after going through a bout of COVID in May in my home in Chicago. Never got it walking for the 4 months in other countries. But after a few weeks, we recovered, and we had tickets to come to Spain, so we carried on and came to Spain and walked some different Caminos around Galicia, the Portuguese way for a few days, the Frances for a few days. We walked from Santiago to the Muxia via Finisterre, and we were here to buy a place that I was going to call the Global Pilgrim House, a rest stop for pilgrims, and the deal fell through a bit over a month ago. So we said, well, what the heck, we'll just keep walking, and we actually decided to walk from Valencia to Santiago, about 1,200 K, on perhaps the most solo of all the Caminos. We walked from Valencia to Toledo for about 3 weeks. But this was in July, and we were in Toledo, which is one of the most beautiful cities on any of the Caminos, I think, by the way. And the temperature forecast for the next day was 44. So we said, that's enough. And then we bused the next day to Ponferrada and walked the Camino Invierno.
There's obviously something that attracts you to walking a pilgrimage. What is it that brings you back to walk each time?
It's just a passion within, I suppose. It's like everybody else. Some people's passion is reading. Some are, is working on cars, and some is meditation. Some is walking in Nepal. Mine is just walking, and I've come to love the pilgrimage aspects of it and come to realize that every long walk is a pilgrimage and to treat it as such. So that's kind of how I've evolved. And as much as I do the Camino de Santiago, and I try to come back to it every year and walk for at least a month or two, if not longer, I don't want to lose sight of it's a beautiful world out there with many beautiful walks and other pilgrimages. And for example, in 2 days, we're going to start the Kerry Way in the southwest part of Ireland, which is about a 9-day, couple of 100-kilometer walk.
If you had any advice for a pilgrim wanting to do their first Camino de Santiago?
Yeah, I suppose I would go onto these Facebook groups and, talk to some people like yourselves who have experience. And there's plenty of you in Australia. And one of the things that I love about the Camino are the people that have done it and how much they develop a passion for it and they want to help others. So there's plenty of people like yourselves in Australia, I know, that want to help others. But I think the big thing is not to listen too much to others. Get your advice, but make your own decision. Because you hear on the Facebook groups, oh, you got to do the Norte, or you got to do Frances, or you got to do Via de la Plata has less people, or Portugal, because you go through 2 countries. And they're all great. I haven't done a Camino that I didn't love. So I think it's just connecting with your own, part of the pilgrimage is to connect with your spiritual self. So I think, and everybody's got a different spiritual self and a different path. So I think it's very important for you to try and listen to your soul, if you will, and do the Camino that's best for you. And that may be walking from an ancestral home in Ireland or England for somebody from Australia, or it may be walking 100K with the big groups of people from Sarria to Santiago, or the Norte, or if you want less people, the Via de la Plata, but it's a personal thing. So, and there's no bad Camino. So
for me, it's the people that you meet. I just find that really fascinating because the right people for you just happen to come across your path. It's very spiritual. Yeah.
That's very true. And, if you're a people person and you're wanting to connect with others, I also found that, you hear people talk negatively about the Frances, especially these days with the crowds. And I don't disagree with the Sarria to Santiago part of it, but I also found it to be the most special, Maggie. And just as you said,
very beautiful.
Yeah, you meet some much more unusual people on the Frances, in that you meet people with, who've just recovered from cancer. You meet 3 generations of a family. You meet 80 and 90-year-olds. Just, it's a much more diverse group. And, a huge part of that one is engaging with others, where the Via de la Plata is very nice, but it's mostly Camino veterans that are, they're not in the spiritual essence of as much as they are in just because they, they love the Camino, and I was on it, but I didn't find it as special, for example, as the Frances. It's still a great Camino, but very, very different in that it's more of a historical walk through Roman history. But who's to say, somebody else could have the most special spiritual, experience of their life on it. So who knows?
We were talking about meeting people on the Camino. Did you find that walking in 2021 far less crowds than in the past, because some countries like Australia are not traveling?
Levante, in 3 weeks, we didn't see any other pilgrims. But they also tell you not to walk the Via de la Plata and the Levante in July or August. Only crazy people do.
Yeah.
So we were the only crazies that we ran into anyway. But when we walked on the Portuguese way, there were, there were a good number of people around. That was in June and July. And I'd never seen so many people on the Santiago to Finisterre and Muxia route as I did this last time. And I probably
Really?
walked that 6 times. And then we spent several days on the Frances, including walking backwards for a couple of days where you run into a lot of people. But it wasn't overly crowded, but as you were suggesting, you didn't run into, I don't remember running into any Australians, just a few Americans. No English as a primary language speakers. It was really very heavily Spanish this year. And that's why the big crowds, and you heard some stories about people leaving the streets, sleeping in the streets, was all in August. I think it's gotten better. And typically this is a time when a lot of the older Americans and England and Ireland and Australians and so forth and others come because it's not so hot.
Yeah.
And the Spanish, there's a lot less Spanish people. So I think if you were coming now, it's a nice time to walk.
And you're wanting to settle in Spain, are you?
Yeah, well, we were hoping to, buy a house on the Frances and open a global pilgrim house. I have a website called globalpilgrim.net.
Yeah.
And the goal being we're going to put up clusters of photos of canvas prints of all the different Caminos and then all the other pilgrimages around the world, with the idea that as people walk the Camino, like yourselves, they fall in love with it and realize, unlike a lot of other things you do in life where you do it once and you check it off the bucket list and move on to something else, so many people become, quasi Camino junkies and start coming back. So the goal was to give back to the pilgrims and give them information, ideas about other pilgrimages, and in Spain on the Camino de Santiago, but also other pilgrimages around the world. But our deal fell through, so we're still looking for a house.
I'm sure once you have it, you'll find a number of us Australians coming your way.
Definitely.
So maybe a jar of Vegemite in the cupboard. If you think about what you carry in your backpack along the Camino, what item is the most valuable that you feel you carry with you?
I don't know. I suppose I've got it down to so few items that everything's important. But I suppose I wouldn't walk without I have a little tea thermos. So, I like to stop an hour or two each day in the pilgrimage and get a tea and get some, fill it up and, have a nice slow tea break.
Do you have a favorite Camino? Is it the Frances?
But for me, the most special Camino was walking from my ancestral home. If you get the chance and you have the time and the health, that's quite special. And I walked from the west of Ireland and got to know my home county Clare and stayed with in the house of where my grandfather was born and my grandmother was born, and then walked all the way through Ireland and all the way through France. I didn't meet another pilgrim until day 60 on the Camino de Tours, which is the route from Paris. And this was well south of Paris. And then that made the Frances that much more special because you were lonely and so you wanted to connect with people. And so it was just very, very special to walk all that way.
Wow. Well, that was very special to hear you share your experience
thank
with
you.
us.
Bye-bye, Kevin. Thank you.
I hope you guys open up food.